Alright, y'all. So today I want to talk about James Harden and the recent headlines he just made because now I'm ultimately confused and I want to ask the question of has James Harden taken this idea of the player empowerment just too far? Has he stretched it too far? Has he made a mistake? So for a quick recap, it all started during this offseason when there was a lot of drama that started based on, Daryl Morey left, Mike D'Antoni left, and then we saw James Harden request a trade after Russell Westbrook maybe had some also trade requests of his own. And the entire scenario for the Houston Rockets was bad. A lot of the role players were upset with how they're being used or how they're being paid in some cases. And all the Rockets were on a downward spiral towards the bottom of the Western Conference in a very quick fashion. From there, we saw the Rockets go away from their small ball system. They bring in a new head coach, Stephen Silas. Raphael Stone takes over Daryl Morey's spot as the general manager. And then we see them bring on some new additions like DeMarcus Cousins and Christian Wood in an effort to go away from the previous small ball era. After that, we saw them then trade Russell Westbrook for John Wall in what was essentially a straight up trade, although Washington did throw a pick in it, but that doesn't really matter for this video. Either way, the Rockets made it clear that they were going to make moves based on the factor of wanting to get James Harden back on the roster and comfortable and happy with this scenario. And even if you take James Harden out of the equation, they still have a pretty solid roster. Obviously, there were some injury concerns with both DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall, but through two preseason games right now, it's still very early to tell, but from those two games, it is seeming like they are healthy and playing like their old selves, not quite at the same level, but at a level that's very close to it. So NBA fans are happy to see some injured guys return and be healthy and just be able to play good basketball again. But they still have, as the Rockets still have the issue that James Harden isn't quite back in the facility yet. He hasn't fully committed to the team yet, and I'm just not quite sure why. After the Westbrook and John Wall trade, there was a report that came out that said that James Harden was more willing to play with John Wall than Russell Westbrook, so for the Rockets, that trade made sense. You try to keep your star players happy. The whole Russell Westbrook thing just didn't really work out the way it was supposed to, so the Wizards were also willing to make the trade, so in the Rockets' sense of ideas, why not make the trade? It could please both parties as Westbrook wanted out, and James Harden just wanted to get some sort of a new system and idea change. But in the days after the trade, James Harden was not found at the training facility. He was found at clubs partying with rappers and other, people who go to clubs. And John Wall went on the record to say that he was fully expecting James Harden to be back for the start of the season and that James Harden was, willing to make things work and play alongside John Wall. And at this point, there were a lot of question marks surrounding the Rockets. Like I said earlier, we didn't know whether John Wall was going to be John Wall. We didn't know whether DeMarcus Cousins was going to be DeMarcus Cousins. We didn't know if James Harden was actually going to come back or not. But then these two preseason games happened for the Houston Rockets. Their first two, one last night and then the other a few other nights ago. And NBA fans were pleased to see that John Wall was back and playing really well. DeMarcus Cousins gave us a few stretches of some great play. John Wall put together two good games where he scored into the 20s and had one game he had double-digit assists. The other one he had a good number of assists. His burst is back. It's all there. He's driving to the rim. He's making good moves, taking shots, just playing good basketball that we remember John Wall for. And DeMarcus Cousins looks like he's going to fit right into that offensive big man role. Not quite the same usage that he saw in Sacramento when he was at his best, or even New Orleans. But he looks like he could play similar to, I've said this in a recent video, but I saw someone liken what his role would be to Marc Gasol on the Raptors, where he's not exactly asked to do a whole lot on offense, but he's used more as a playmaker and someone who can bully mismatches, which I think is a perfect role for this DeMarcus Cousins that we've currently seen across these two preseason games. Overall, this Rockets team, through the additions of Wall and Boogie, and then you also add in the fact that Eric Gordon's still there and is still a very skilled scorer and just player in general. They also have Christian Wood, who's yet to even see any time in the preseason. I think it's safe to say that just using the group who have played through these few preseason games, excluding James Harden pretty much, that this team would be classified as a good team who can maybe make the playoffs, but would be considered one piece away from being a contender. But funny enough for them, they have that one piece on the payroll, and that one piece is James Harden. Now maybe James Harden sees it a bit differently. Maybe he wants to go to a team where he knows that they're going to be finals contenders as soon as he steps on the roster. But I think he might have to take a step back and really look at what Houston has done to better their roster around James Harden. I mean, so far it seems like Steven Silas, the new head coach, has some good ideas that have been drawn up and some limited action. But he seems like for the most part that he knows what he's doing. I think it'd definitely be worth James Harden to take a shot. I think another reason why it would be beneficial for James Harden to take a chance with this new roster and maybe give them at least till the trade deadline to see what exactly he has there is that the Rockets have done a wonderful job of almost completely nullifying James Harden's, player empowerment position that we've seen so much in the past. For example, prior to James Harden, the most recent superstar who we saw try to be in this position and get a trade out of his current situation was Anthony Davis just a year ago. In Davis's case, he's much younger, so it'd make a lot more sense and it'd be a lot easier for a trade to get done. But you also have to put into perspective that the NBA fans were on Davis's side to get traded, and that's due to the fact that in his last year with the New Orleans Pelicans, they finished as the 13th seed, and that was even with Anthony Davis playing 56 games throughout the season. He honestly played a good amount, even though he was kind of marked as someone who sat out during that season in order to get traded. He really only did it towards the end of the year because he noticed that the Pelicans had no future plans and were going nowhere if they were to keep on to him. Because of that, the NBA fans had his back through the trade negotiations, and they were pinning the Pelicans as the antagonist in this scenario. So even though we were all unhappy to see that Anthony Davis would eventually go on to the Lakers, that was the right move. I mean, the Lakers won a championship, no matter how mad the rest of the NBA fans can be mad at them for winning. They made the right choice. They went out and got a superstar player to match with another superstar legend player in LeBron James, and they ended up winning a championship. So I tie this back to James Harden because in his case, the NBA fans were on his side at first because Houston was looking like a downward spiral. A lot of the blame was being pointed at the front office because almost every player on that roster was unhappy in their current scenario. But we've seen this front office now make some moves where they trade Russell Westbrook for John Wall, and they bring in DeMarcus Cousins and Christian Wood, and all of a sudden there's a whole lot of fan favorites on one team, which makes them an enjoyable team to watch and follow. I mean, the love that I've been seeing on Twitter the past couple of days for the Houston Rockets without James Harden even touching the floor is insane. The complete 180 turnaround that they made from a downward spiral to a fan favorite amongst every NBA fan on Twitter. And in doing this, I think the Rockets have successfully made themselves the protagonist, and in doing so made James Harden the antagonist, because now I think a lot of people are questioning why James Harden is still sitting out. There was a report that came out today where James Harden said that even though the Rockets traded for John Wall, he still isn't completely sure if that's going to be enough to get him to play. And I feel like this recent news report has really put himself out there as the enemy in this situation. And through all of this, it's made it so that the NBA fans aren't supporting James Harden as much. Now they're going back to supporting the Rockets, making James Harden's position a lot less powerful in terms of being traded at his request. So while a trade is certainly still on the table for James Harden, I think it's becoming more and more unlikely as this Rockets team continues to just impress NBA fans around the world. They want to see John Wall play. They want to see DeMarcus Cousins play. Hopefully they can stay healthy so that we can continue to watch them play. But I think most of all, NBA fans want to see James Harden come back to this team and make them a contender in a very strong West. And now it's looking like this might honestly be one of the better teams, or just better fitting teams, that James Harden has played on in terms of being an actual basketball team and not an analytics grab. So I guess the point in all of this that I'm trying to get at is that the tables have somehow completely turned for the Houston Rockets. Now they're seen as the good guys while James Harden is being seen as the bad guy, and it has completely taken away his power to request trades and has gone against the entire player empowerment movement that we've seen become so popular over the last decade or so. And I think it's just really interesting that how just a few moves, a team has gone from a complete downward spiral, like I've said, to now being vaunted as a potential candidate for a title run in a already stacked Western Conference. And it's all going to come down to whether James Harden wants to play or not. This team will only go as far as he allows them to. The NBA fan in me really wants James Harden to come back because I do think that if everyone can stay healthy, there is something serious going on in Houston. And I think I speak for a lot of NBA fans when I say that. But yeah, I just wanted to go on a bit of a ramble here, just talking about how James Harden has lost his position of power. But I think that's about it for all the thoughts I have. So drop your comments down below on what you think about this whole James Harden situation as it continues to unravel in front of our eyes as we approach the season opener on the 22nd. And outside of that, leave a like if you enjoyed this video or enjoy this type of content. And other than that, most importantly, as always, thank you for watching.